The moon hung low over Alexandria, brushing the rooftops with silver as the harbor exhaled its salted breath. Lanterns swung lazily from the tall masts of anchored ships, and somewhere far off, a lyre was being plucked, its notes dancing like dragonflies over marble streets. Beneath the colonnades near the Serapeum, an old man hunched over a brass instrument, gears and cogs scattered like breadcrumbs on his workbench. His hands were cracked and calloused, each finger moving with the precision of memory, not sight. His name was Petros, and though few knew it, he had once studied under Archimedes himself, before the siege, before the fires, before memory turned Alexandria to smoke. Now, Petros was a watchmaker. Not for time, but for dreams. The device before him ticked not in seconds, but in thoughts. A strange globe of interlocking rings and blinking stones, it pulsed with the rhythm of sleep. It was a dream dial, his own invention, and only one of 3 in existence. Tonight, he would test it again. As he placed the final gem into its setting, a voice crept from the shadows. "You still trying to speak with the dead, old man?" Petros didn't flinch. "I prefer to think of it as listening to the past." The voice belonged to a girl, no more than 17. Her name was Selene. Or at least, that was the name she gave. She moved like a thief but spoke like a scholar, quoting Plato when angry and Aesop when amused. She had found Petros months ago after stealing a scroll from the great library and nearly getting caught by Roman guards. Petros had hidden her, fed her, and in return, she helped him gather the rare herbs and metals needed for his work. "I brought the sapphire dust," she said, tossing a small satchel onto the bench. "And something else?" She pulled from her robe a parchment sealed in red wax. Petros raised a brow. The wax bore the eagle of Rome. "Where did you get this?" "I didn't steal it," she lied. Petros opened it carefully. It was a letter. Not just any letter, one written by the Emperor Marcus Aurelius himself. The ink was faded but unmistakable. A meditation on dreams, written not for war or statecraft, but for his dying son, Commodus. Selene watched him read it. "You think he dreamed like us?" "No," Petros whispered. "He dreamed like the gods." He turned back to the dream dial and twisted a ring. The device hummed. A ripple passed through the air, like heat rising from stone. And for a moment, just a breath of one, Petros thought he heard laughter, soft, childlike, ancient. Selene leaned in. "What did it do?" Petros stared at the machine. "It opened a door." "To where?" "To him." "To who?" "To Marcus Aurelius." Selene backed away. "You said it couldn't bring back the dead." "It can't," he said, almost smiling. "But the dead, they can bring themselves back. If they left the right dream behind." Outside, a wind rose suddenly, carrying the scent of myrrh and crushed parchment. The city held its breath. In a palace far away, a Roman senator awoke screaming. And in the great library, a single scroll fell from its shelf, landing open to a blank page. At dawn, Alexandria wore its age like a shroud. The mist rolled in from the harbor, softening the scars of conquest and fire. Sunlight filtered through the haze, gilding the broken columns and chipped mosaics with a cruel sort of beauty. Selene moved quietly through the market, wrapped in a cloak too large to belong to her. She ignored the vendors, the priests, the watchful Roman patrols. Her mind was still on the dream dial, and the emperor it had summoned. She had not slept. Petros had stayed up with the machine long after she left, adjusting its rings and muttering to himself in Greek, Latin, and something else she didn't recognize. He spoke to shadows. Whispered to ghosts. She returned just past sunrise, and found him collapsed in his chair, snoring softly, a scroll cradled in his lap like an infant. It was not the one she'd stolen. This scroll was new. No seal. The parchment was fresh, the ink still damp. Selene touched it and flinched, it was cold. She unrolled it carefully. The writing was neat, deliberate, and written in a style centuries out of fashion. It was a dream. Not a diary. Not a command. A dream, written down as though the author knew it had to be recorded. I stood on the edge of a battlefield, it read. Not one of flesh and sword, but of memory and silence. The sky bled purple. The stars moved backward. And a voice, mine, and not mine, told me I was not alone. Selene stared at the words, her breath held tight in her throat. Petros stirred. It worked, he said, groggily. You wrote this? No, he said. Marcus did. She blinked. You're saying Marcus Aurelius, dead for nearly 200 years, wrote this last night? Petros nodded. The dial doesn't summon people. It summons what they left behind. Thoughts, dreams. Echoes of mind stored in the folds of time. That's impossible. Only to those without imagination. Selene looked again at the parchment. So what happens now? We answer, Petros said. He handed her a fresh scroll and a tiny quill, one made from raven feather and tipped in silver. Right. Not what you want to say, what you want him to know. What if I don't believe any of this? He smiled. Then write the truth. Dreams respect honesty. Outside, bells chimed from the temple of Serapis. A wind picked up, carrying dust and the faint scent of burning sandalwood. Selene dipped the quill into ink. She began, to the man who dreamed backward. The next night came quickly, though it felt as if the day had stretched on forever. Selene couldn't stop thinking about what she'd written. Her letter had felt foolish in the moment, clumsy, unsure, but when Petros placed it beneath the dial and turned the ring of rubies 3 clicks clockwise, something shifted. Not in the air. Not in the room. Inside her. She hadn't noticed it until hours later, when the streets had gone still and the oil lamp burned low. There was a weight behind her eyes, not fatigue, but depth, like the bottom of a deep well. She closed them and found herself standing in a field of silent statues. Each figure was robed and regal, their faces hidden behind silver masks. They were frozen mid-thought, their marble hands raised to lips, to temples, to hearts. She turned. A man stood at the far end of the field. He was neither young nor old, with a face that seemed carved from both patience and pain. He wore the armor of Rome, but loosely, as though it belonged to someone else. In his hand, he held a scroll. Selene, he said without voice, his words vibrating through her ribcage. She stepped closer. You're him. I am a memory of him, the man said, nodding. A shadow, lingering in thought, fed by curiosity. Yours? Then this is a dream. All is dream, he replied. But this one, you shaped. Selene glanced around the strange plain of statues. Where are we? In the place between your world and mine. In the soil where ideas are buried and wait to bloom again. He held out the scroll. She took it. When she opened her eyes, morning sun was breaking over the horizon. The scroll lay across her chest. The ink was not dry. The scroll's contents. To Selene, child of dust and question. I do not know your time, but I know your mind. I felt it pressing into the edges of what I am. Your letter, honest, uncertain, burning with fear and fire, reached me. I once wrote, waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. But I was wrong to be so certain. Doubt is a form of devotion. You asked if I feared the gods. No. I feared my son. I feared what Rome would become. The gods, they are spectators. Your world may have fallen from the one I knew, but I sense in it something vital. Keep asking. Keep building. You are not alone in the silence. Marcus. Petros found her still sitting on the floor, scroll in hand. You saw him, he said quietly. Selene nodded. And he saw you. Outside, the sun climbed over the library's white domes. From the shadows of a colonnade, a raven watched with eyes like ink. As Petros turned to light the stove, Selene stayed seated, staring at the scroll. For the first time in years, she felt something old stirring behind her ribs, a sense of purpose, maybe, or belonging. Whatever it was, it hummed like the dream dial itself. She wasn't just reading history anymore. She was becoming part of it. Petros didn't like visitors, especially the kind who knocked after sundown. But when the sharp rap echoed through the shop just past twilight, he froze mid-sip of tea. Selene watched him tense, his fingers tightening around the cup until the porcelain clicked. "You expecting someone?" "No," he said. "And that's why I'm worried." He opened the door. The man standing there wore the colors of no empire, bore no scroll, no crest, no guard. He looked like a merchant, or perhaps a monk, draped in coarse robes, sandals caked with dust. But it was his eyes that struck Selene most. They shimmered, not with magic, but with memory, like he had seen the same centuries that lived in the scrolls. "I heard you collect time," the man said to Petros. "I don't sell it," Petros replied. "Good," the man said. "I didn't come to buy. I came to warn." Selene's stomach turned. "About what?" The man entered uninvited and closed the door behind him. He moved slowly, studying the shelves stacked with pieces of broken sundials, dream stones, ancient ink, and bent compass needles. "You've spoken to one who should be silent," the man said. Petros's face darkened. "You know about Marcus?" The man nodded. "I know many things. And I know this, when the minds of the dead are stirred, something else stirs with them." Selene crossed her arms. "You're saying we summoned a ghost?" "Not a ghost. A presence. The dream dial doesn't simply pull fragments, it opens echoes. And some of those echoes are not empty." He turned to the dial on the workbench, its rings still humming faintly from the night before. "Where did you get this?" "I built it," Petros said. "With what was left of Archimedes' final designs." The man smiled. "Then you've done what even kings feared, you've made memory a doorway." Selene stepped forward. "Are you here to stop us?" "No," he said. "I'm here to tell you, others will try." He pulled from his sleeve a sliver of obsidian, no longer than a finger, and placed it on the desk. "When they come, they won't knock. They'll take. And they'll burn what they don't understand." Petros stared at the stone. "What is this?" "A key," the man said. "To the other side of the dream." And with that, he turned and left, vanishing into the evening fog like he'd never been there at all. Selene looked at Petros. "Do we trust him?" "We trust the warning," he said. Outside, the lamps along the harbor flickered once, then twice, as if something unseen had passed between their flames. The obsidian sliver sat untouched on the workbench for a full day. Neither Petros nor Selene dared move it. It hummed, not with sound, but with the tension of something waiting to be remembered. The man who had left it gave no name, no return path, only that cryptic message, a key, to the other side of the dream. Petros studied it through a magnifying lens. "It's not just stone. It's etched. Look." Under the glass, delicate carvings revealed themselves, lines looping, intersecting, some resembling constellations, others letters from alphabets long extinct. Selene traced the patterns with her finger, and for a moment, the air around her blurred. She pulled her hand back, startled. "Did you see that?" "I did," Petros said, voice hushed. "But it didn't come from the stone. It came from you." That night, the dream dial spun slower than usual. Petros had adjusted its rings according to the patterns on the obsidian, and added a small chain of onyx beads from an old Ptolemaic astrolabe. When the final click locked into place, Selene felt it, not like before, not a tug or whisper, but a pull deep in her spine, like gravity had changed direction. She lay down on the floor cushions and closed her eyes. In an instant, she was falling. Not through space, but through thought. She plunged past broken columns and cracked tablets, past towering shelves of ancient memory, until she landed softly in a circular chamber made of black glass. The walls shimmered with moving images, moments in time flickering like candlelight, battles, births, betrayals, lovers whispering in forgotten tongues. She turned in place, and every turn unveiled more memories not her own. In the center stood a pedestal, and upon it, a mirror. As she approached, her reflection changed. It was her, but older. Wiser. Wearing the robes of a scholar, not a thief. Her eyes glowed faintly. The reflection spoke first. "Selene," it said. "You early." Selene stumbled back. "What is this place?" "This is your memory palace," the reflection said. "Or it will be, if you survive." She blinked. Survive what? The dream war. Selene's heart pounded. Is this a metaphor? Do I look like a metaphor? And then, behind the reflection, the mirror clouded. A new figure appeared. It was Marcus Aurelius, but not the kind man from before. His face was broken, fractured like a statue struck with a hammer. His eyes were empty, and behind him loomed something enormous. Not a beast, not a man, but a shape with too many limbs and too many eyes, shifting constantly. Selene screamed. The mirror shattered. She woke choking on air, covered in sweat, Petros beside her with a cloth and a flask. "You saw it," he said. "What was it?" "I don't know." He helped her sit. "But I think we've gone too deep." Later, after tea and silence, Selene asked, "What did he mean by dream war?" Petros hesitated. "There's a theory that all human thought is connected. That memory, once formed, never truly vanishes. Every idea leaves a residue. Enough residue, and it begins to congeal. Form consciousness. Like gods. Like something older than gods. Thought made flesh. And that thing in the mirror? It wasn't Marcus. It was wearing him." Selene shivered. "So what do we do?" Petros took a breath. "We follow the map." He held up the obsidian sliver and turned it slowly beneath a lantern. "What map?" "Not a map of land," he said. "A map of minds. It shows who dreamed, where they dreamed, and what they left behind." Selene stared at the swirling lines and symbols. And for the first time, she understood something. "This isn't just about Marcus," she whispered. "There are more." "Yes," Petros said grimly. "And some of them have been dreaming, for a very long time." Outside, the city's alleys groaned with the wind. And beneath Alexandria, buried deep within the bones of the library, a locked vault stirred for the first time in 300 years. By midday, Selene and Petros stood outside the great library, staring at its western wall. The crowds moved around them, scholars clutching scrolls, guards with bronzed armor catching sunlight. To anyone watching, they looked like a grandfather and his restless granddaughter debating history. But beneath Selene's cloak was the obsidian key, warm against her skin. "There's a door," Petros whispered, barely moving his lips. "It's not on any map." "Not anymore." "How do you know it's real?" "Because I hid it." The Western Wing had once housed works of forbidden philosophy, texts from Carthage, Babylon, and even Atlantis, or so rumor said. When Roman flames consumed part of the library, Petros had salvaged what he could. Some things he had hidden. He led her through a side corridor and down a staircase disguised behind a mosaic of Athena. The stone shifted with a firm push, revealing a narrow passage descending into shadow. They lit their torches. The air grew colder, heavier. Dust curled in their nostrils. Beneath the library, time didn't flow, it waited. The passage ended in a circular chamber sealed with a bronze disc. At its center was a keyhole, no bigger than a coin, shaped like an eye. Selene produced the obsidian shard. "Wait," Petros said. "If it rejects you." But it didn't. The key slid in smoothly and turned with a sigh. The vault groaned open. Inside, the air smelled of salt and cedar. Racks of stone tablets lined the walls, older than anything above ground. Scrolls wrapped in gold twine. A bowl of still black ink that shimmered without light. And at the center, a casket of glass and iron. Selene approached it. "What is this?" Petros whispered, a dream not yet dreamt. Inside the casket lay a man. Or what had once been one. His skin was grey, lips sealed with thread. Symbols were carved into his arms, his throat, even his eyelids. He looked ancient and newborn all at once. Selene swallowed. Is he dead? I don't think so, Petros said. I think his, paused. He pointed to the carvings. That's Sumerian. The oldest language of sleep. Suddenly, Selene's torch flared. The man's eyes opened. Just for a moment. Just enough to show they were completely white. And then they closed again. Selene stumbled back. We shouldn't be here. No, Petros said. But neither should he. Behind them, the vault door clicked shut. The vault door closed with a weight that neither Selene nor Petros could reverse. It didn't slam, it sighed, like a lung exhaling for the first time in centuries. Selene turned, but the keyhole was already gone, sealed behind the seamless bronze surface. We're locked in, she said. Not locked, Petros murmured. Chosen. He stepped forward, torchlight dancing over the glass casket once more. The man inside lay still now, the flicker of his eyelids gone, though a faint pulse had begun to beat at his temple. Selene could almost hear it, like a drum echoing across great distances. The carvings on the body were clearer now. They pulsed slightly, glowing with soft gold beneath the skin, as if ink had been poured into his veins. At his chest was a symbol they both recognized, the ringed circle of the dream dial. This man was a dreamer, Petros whispered. Before we had words for it. But why is he here? Selene asked. Why preserve him like this? He's not just a dreamer. He's a gate. Petros reached into his satchel and pulled out a thin rod of copper etched with tiny sigils. I built this after deciphering the first Babylonian dream seals, he explained. It should read, or react. He pressed the rod against the glass. A low hum began to vibrate through the chamber. The tablets lining the walls rattled softly, and one scroll unraveled itself mid-air, suspended in a breeze that didn't exist. The man in the casket inhaled. Selene grabbed Petros' arm. We need to stop. Too late. The glass lid slid open without sound. The man sat up. He didn't speak. He didn't scream. He simply opened his mouth and exhaled, a plume of black mist that shimmered and scattered, curling into the corners of the chamber like smoke seeking a host. Selene gasped, backing away. Her mind filled with a rush of voices, not one, but thousands, whispers layered over chants, lullabies, screams, poetry in a dozen lost languages. For a moment, she wasn't in the vault. She was standing on the banks of the Euphrates, watching priests lower golden tablets into the river. Then she blinked, and it was gone. The man looked directly at her. His eyes, now glowing faintly, were not white but mirrored, reflecting her face, Petros, the torchlight, and something else. Something behind them. Then he finally spoke. I am Ninurta, he said in a voice like breaking stone. Last of the Sumerian sleepwalkers. He stepped from the casket. Not with menace, but gravity. The air bent slightly around him. Symbols glowed on his skin with every movement. I was sealed here before your pyramids breathed. I was buried by those who feared thought unbound. The hand you have ope. Selene stepped forward, heart hammering. What do you want? Ninurta smiled, but it was not a kind smile. To finish what I began. He turned to the vault wall. And it melted. The melted wall led into a spiral tunnel of raw obsidian, slick with memory and etched with moving symbols, icons of serpents devouring stars, suns split in half, and figures kneeling before impossible skies. The air within was thick and dream-heavy, each breath catching images behind Selene's eyelids, a Roman emperor weeping in a ruined amphitheater, a child giving birth to a mirror, a mountain made entirely of bone. Petros followed close, sketching furiously in his journal, despite his shaking hands. You said you were the last, Selene said, her voice echoing against the tunnel's living walls. Last of the sleepwalkers. What does that mean? Ninurta spoke without turning. We were called many names. Oracles, seers, poets. But sleepwalkers is closest. We walked the rivers of dream the way others walk deserts or markets. We shaped thought. Bent memory. Anchored meaning in the void. Petros interjected, but if that's true, why did they lock you away? Ninurta paused. Because one of us broke the dream. They entered a vast chamber, circular, with a ceiling that seemed to stretch into infinity. Floating above the center was a dream map, a massive, spiraling globe formed of light and ink, slowly rotating. Dotted across its surface were brilliant pinpricks of gold, dreamers. The dream war, Selene said softly. Yes, Ninurta replied. It has already begun. The dream dial was your key, but also your call. Others have heard it. Not all will come in peace. The dream map zoomed in, focusing on 4 glowing names. Hypatia of Alexandria, her dream still pulsed, though her body was long gone. Leonardo of Florence, a dreamer whose sketch machines meant for sleep, not war. Mary of Godwin, a girl who dreamed lightning into life. Tesla of Smiljan, the one who tried to wake the dream entirely. These, Ninurta said, the other doors. Selene looked in awe. But they are all dead. No, Ninurta said. They are remembered. And that means they are dreaming still. He extended a finger. The map responded. A 5th light flickered into being. Selene. You are a dreamer now. Not just a visitor. The dream knows your name. Petros looked up. So what happens now? Ninurta turned, eyes burning brighter. We awaken more. We gather them. Because something is coming, something vast, and ancient, and hungry. It eats dreamers. Feeds on memory. And it has stirred in the Far East. He raised his hand. A door split open in the chamber wall, revealing a staircase leading into pure blue light. Come, he said. Where are we going? Selene asked. To the vault of Genghis Khan, Ninurta replied, stepping into the light. Where the memory of conquest was sealed, and forgotten by force. Selene and Petros exchanged one last glance. And followed him into the blinding dream. The dream light swallowed them whole. Selene felt her body dissolve, not in pain, but in forgetting. Her limbs lost their shape, her breath turned into wind, her thoughts untethered from language. For a moment, she was nothing but motion, sliding across the thin surface of time. Then her feet touched ground. She stumbled forward, blinking against a pale grey sky. The wind was dry and cold, brushing over her skin like the whisper of silk. Ahead, the land stretched for miles, rolling steps, low mountains in the distance, and a black circle of stone rising out of the plain like a wound. They had arrived in Mongolia. Or rather, a dream of it. The Karakoram of memory, not geography. Petros emerged beside her, coughing, brushing dust from his sleeves. Ninurta was already walking toward the black stone circle, each step leaving a faint shimmer in the grass behind him. Selene caught up. This is where Genghis Khan is buried. No one knows where his body lies, Ninurta replied. But this is where his memory sleeps. His dream was so powerful, so enduring, that it had to be sealed. Not for protection, but containment. They entered the stone circle. Within, the earth sloped downward into a massive hollow, like a bowl carved into the step. In its center stood a pillar, 20 feet tall, obsidian black, with golden veins pulsing just beneath the surface. Around it were hundreds of arrows embedded into the ground, frozen mid-flight, as if time had stopped the instant a great battle began. What is this? Petros whispered. A dream caught in motion, Ninurta said. This is the memory of war, the moment before blood. He approached the pillar, placing his palm against it. The ground trembled. And then, like smoke pulling inward, the pillar unraveled. It did not fall. It folded into itself, layers of time peeling back like pages, revealing a staircase spiraling downward. Cut from stone, lit by unseen fire. They descended in silence. The air changed the deeper they went. At first it was just cooler. Then it smelled of metal. Then of memory. Selene began hearing things again, not whispers, but words spoken directly into her mind. Build. Break. Burn. Begin again. The staircase ended in a circular chamber walled in polished bronze. In its center stood a low stone platform. Upon it, a sword. The blade was ancient, wide, and crude, no gems, no gold. Just iron and blood. Ninurta stepped back. This is the weapon of forgetting. Selene narrowed her eyes. You said this was a dream. Weapons aren't real. Real enough, he said. In the dream, this sword was forged from Khan's will. He dreamed a world of conquest so fiercely, it took shape. Every mind that forgot him, every map that erased him, fed into this blade. Petros approached slowly. So what does it do? It cuts memory. Not flesh. Use it once, and a name disappears from history. Twice, and a city vanishes from all maps. 3 times. He trailed off. Selene picked up the sword. It was heavier than it looked, but it didn't resist her. It felt ready. You want me to use this? She asked. No, Ninurta said. I want you to keep it from falling into the wrong hands. Because there are others hunting now. Dreamers twisted by hunger. They want to wake something ancient. And this blade, this artifact, can sever the chains that hold it back. Selene lowered the sword. What are we fighting? Ninurta took a long breath. An idea. Petros scoffed softly. Ideas don't kill people. They do, Ninurta said. If they live long enough. A tremor shook the chamber. Torchlight wavered. From one of the walls, a shape began to peel away. A figure, tall, robed, faceless, stepped forward, its presence sucking warmth from the air. Its body was black static, its movements fractured, like a dream being remembered too fast. Selene raised the sword. The figure paused. Its head tilted. Then it spoke, not in words, but in her father's voice. You've come far, my little thief, it said. Selene's hand shook. You're not him. No. But he lives here. In you. And in dreams, that's enough. Ninurta stepped forward. Wraith, he hissed. The figure turned. Traitor. They moved at once. Ninurta's palm cracked open, revealing a circle of shifting runes. He thrust it forward, and light slammed into the wraith, pinning it to the wall. It hissed, warping the chamber's edges like heat over stone. Petros grabbed Selene's arm. Go. The 3 of them sprinted up the staircase, the wraith howling behind them. As they ascended, the stairwell began to collapse, stone warping, steps shattering, symbols unraveling in midair. They burst back into the open steps. The sky was darker now. Stars bled red. The wind had stopped. Selene turned, sword in hand, but the staircase was gone. The stone circle had collapsed into flat earth, as if it had never existed. Petros gasped. What now? Ninurta didn't answer. He was staring at the horizon. There, in the distance, 5 pillars of black smoke rose into the sky, spiraling upward, bending the clouds around them. What are those? Selene asked. Ninurta's voice was low. Dream fires. Someone is awakening the buried. The black pillars rose like omens from the steppe, twisting the air above them. They weren't smoke, at least not in any earthly sense. They moved against the wind, and they gave off no scent. Birds curved their flight to avoid them. Even the clouds bent like frightened animals. Selene, Petros, and Ninurta stood on a ridgeline, watching. They are dream fires, Ninurta said again, voice hoarse. Signs of awakening. Memory being torn loose from the scenes of sleep. 5 of them, Selene muttered. Why 5? There were 5 vaults, Petros whispered, catching on. 5 places where dream relics were buried. We just visited one. Genghis Khan. Ninurta nodded solemnly. The others are stirring too. Which means we are no longer alone. He lifted a handful of soil and let it fall. It didn't fall straight, it spiraled, like it was caught in some invisible current. Selene gripped the iron sword tighter. So what do we do now? We follow the flame closest to the edge, Ninurta said. The fifth fire. He turned east. It burns over India. The journey through the dreamlands was unlike any travel Petros had ever imagined. They didn't walk, they slipped. Through pages of memory, through ink and scent and story. Every few hours, the world around them would ripple, as if reminding them that this was not the waking world but a collage of what once was, or could be. They passed temples that sang to the stars, rivers that whispered their own names, and cities carved from books. Each night they rested in pockets, little cradles of memory hidden from larger dreams. Selene could never remember falling asleep. She only knew she woke with visions of silver elephants, moonlit towers, and voices speaking Sanskrit backwards. On the fourth night, the dreams changed. Selene found herself walking alone through a field of glass. The stars above were turning slowly, not around the earth, but around a central flame suspended in the sky. As she drew closer, she saw that the flame had a face. Her face. But burning. Then she woke, breath ragged. Ninurta was already awake. You saw it, didn't you? He asked. Selene nodded. What is it? The other dreamer. The one lighting these fires. You know them? I knew them. Long ago. Before the vaults. He wouldn't say more. They arrived in the ruined city at twilight. The dream fire rose from a fractured temple in the city's heart, winding around its domes like a serpent of shadow. The buildings were ancient and decayed, but in the dream, time didn't mean rot, it meant layering. The walls shimmered with versions of themselves. As ruins, as temples, as golden palaces, as skeletal frames. All versions existed at once. At the temple steps stood a girl. She wore robes the color of coal, her hair braided with feathers and wires. In her hands, she held a sphere of glass, pulsing with inner light. Selene stepped forward. The girl looked up. Her eyes were pitch black. You're late, she said. Selene stopped. Who are you? The girl tilted her head. I go by many names. But for you? You can call me Myra. Ninurta stiffened. Petros whispered, you know her. She was a sleepwalker, Ninurta said. One of the oldest. One of the strongest. And now? She fell. Myra smiled at Selene. I didn't fall. I chose. She held up the sphere. You're trying to hold the dream together. But what if the dream is the lie? What if the fire is the truth? The sphere cracked. From within, 1,000 voices screamed and sang at once. Selene clutched her head. What is that? Myra stepped forward. Every forgotten memory. Every silenced story. Every idea that history buried in favor of empire and order. Ninurta drew a circle in the air. Runes flared to life. But Myra was faster. She crushed the sphere. The air exploded with light. And everything shattered. Selene found herself standing in a memory that was not her own. A battlefield. But the warriors weren't men, they were dreams. Living ideas. One shaped like a mother holding a dead child. One shaped like fire with eyes. Another like a mirror that screamed. And there, on the hilltop, stood Myra. Do you see? Her voice echoed. The dream is fragile. It forgets. It edits. It rewrites us. Petros appeared beside Selene, bleeding from one ear. This isn't just a dream anymore. No, Ninurta said, materializing at her other side. It's a war zone. Myra lifted her hands. And the army charged. They didn't fight with blades. They fought with belief. Selene found herself pushing against a thought that tried to become real. An idea that she was nothing, that her memories were borrowed, that her voice didn't matter. She screamed back with the only defense she had, truth. Her truth. Her memories of her father, laughing in the workshop. Her stolen nights in Alexandria, reading scrolls by stolen candlelight. The first time she dreamed a dream that wasn't hers, and loved it anyway. The dream idea shattered against her like glass. Ninurta summoned memories of the Sumerian flood, of constellations older than gods, of language birthed from breath. Petros unleashed a surge of equations, pure logic, to collapse creatures trying to rewrite reality. They reached Myra at the peak. She stood unguarded. Selene approached, sword raised. But Myra didn't flinch. She whispered, "You're like me." "No," Selene said. "I remember who I am." And she struck. Not to kill, but to cut. The sword of forgetting sliced the dream. Myra vanished in a blink of white light. The battlefield dissolved. Only sky remained. Selene opened her eyes. They were back on the step. The dream fire over India was gone. Snuffed out. The blade lay across her lap. Cold. Ninurta breathed slowly beside her. "You did it." Petros was pale, but alive. Selene stared at the horizon. Only 4 flames remained. The fire over India had gone out. But the air remained fractured. The world felt unstable. The dreamlands trembled at the edges, like a mirror left too long in the sun. Each breath Selene took showed glimpses of other places, stone pyramids under purple moons, glass towers rising from oceans, battlefields made of thought. All of it bleeding through the cracks. "You wounded her," Ninurta said. "But Myra's not gone. She's dispersed. Memory, even fractured, lingers." Selene stared into the horizon where the flame had burned. "I didn't want to destroy her," she said. "You didn't," Petros replied, adjusting the shoulder of his travel cloak. "You carved away the infection. But the dream war didn't begin with Myra. And it won't end with her." The sword of forgetting had grown heavier. Not physically, it weighed more in her mind. She could feel the absences now. Whole memories erased from the dreamscape. Words she didn't recognize but knew had once lived inside her. Images that flickered just beyond reach, ancient faces, cities, promises. "Where to now?" she asked quietly. Ninurta's eyes narrowed toward the northwest. "The next flame rises over the lost library." "Alexandria?" "No," he said. "Older." They traveled along the spine of the dream. That's what Ninurta called it, the great path connecting memory to memory, story to story. It appeared as a winding river of shifting symbols, flowing through void, sky, and time. They walked days without sleep. Or maybe they slept constantly. Dream had no logic here. Only momentum. Selene felt herself changing. Not older. Not wiser. Just wider. Her thoughts stretched farther. When she dreamed now, she no longer saw herself, but whole timelines unfolding, histories branching into versions that never were. What if Archimedes had ruled an empire? What if Caesar had never crossed the Rubicon? What if the printing press had existed in Babylon? The library awaited them at the river's end. It stood atop a black mountain rising from a sea of ink. Built of obsidian and bone, the library shimmered in and out of form, sometimes a ziggurat, sometimes a cathedral, sometimes a floating helix of scrolls and stone. Every mind that remembered a library had shaped it. All of them were here. "This is the library without end," Ninurta said. "Built in dream. Guarded by memory." Selene looked up at the titanic gates. They bore no keyhole. Only a phrase. "Only those who have forgotten may enter." Petros frowned. "That's poetic." "It's cruel," Ninurta said. Selene stepped forward. And the gates opened. The library's interior defied sense. Hallways extended into oceans. Staircases led to gardens growing sideways across ceilings. Shelves carried scrolls that wrote themselves as she passed. Other rooms weren't rooms at all, they were emotions crystallized into space, jealousy shaped like a forest, joy shaped like a market, despair like an endless hallway of locked doors. A being appeared to guide them. It looked like a librarian, but was made of turning pages, its arms shifting between ink and bone. Its voice was wind through parchment. Designation, it asked. Ninurta, Dreamwalker, came the reply. Guests? Selene, Keyholder. Petros, Seeker. Purpose? To retrieve the record of the one who was forgotten. The librarian paused. That name is quarantined. We are authorized, Ninurta said. Authorization must be remembered. Ninurta bowed his head. Then we submit ourselves to proof. The librarian gestured. A wall slid open. Inside was a room shaped like a sphere, filled with mirrors. Ninurta stepped in. So did Petros. Selene hesitated. Then entered. The door sealed shut. Each mirror showed a different version of her life. One reflected a Selene who'd grown up wealthy in Athens, studying medicine. Another showed her as a gladiator in Rome. In a third, she was a mother of 3, baking bread in a village with no name. But the fourth mirror was blank. Then it lit. In this version, Selene never found Petros. She'd been caught stealing, imprisoned, then vanished. No memory of her remained in Alexandria. She turned away. The sword of forgetting was glowing. Why show us this? She whispered. To test resolve, said Ninurta, stepping beside her. Every choice in Dream reshapes the library. You must know who you are, even if others don't. The mirrors vanished. The door opened. The librarian stood there, bowing slightly. Authorized. They were led to a room deep in the core. It held only one scroll. Bound in iron. Floating in place. Petros examined it. This isn't memory. No, the librarian said. It is anti-memory. Selene approached. The scroll pulsed with nausea, like a thought trying to reject itself. Who is this? She asked. The librarian answered. The Forgotten King. Selene felt it instantly. Something ancient. Terrifying. A dream so dangerous, it had been erased from every story, every mind, every reality. Why was he forgotten? She asked. Because his dream became real. Ninurta placed a hand on her shoulder. This is our enemy, he said. This is what Myra was waking. Selene stared at the scroll. Then lifted the sword. But the librarian blocked her path. To destroy a record, it said, is to become its next page. Selene froze. Meaning? If you sever his name from memory, the librarian said, the dream must anchor to another. The sword chooses. She lowered the blade. Then we don't destroy it, she said. We read it. Petros gasped. That could overwrite you. Selene nodded. I'll remember carefully. She reached for the scroll. It unwrapped itself. And whispered its first line into her soul. The scroll unraveled without a sound. The iron bindings dissolved into ash midair. Not broken. Not forced. Merely permitted. As if it had waited for someone like Selene. The moment the sentence touched her thoughts, she staggered back, gasping. Her lungs felt too small for the world now inside her. Images surged through her, towers of light rising from sand, armies that walked on echoes, a mouth speaking law before language existed. She fell. Petros caught her. It's starting, Ninurta said grimly. She's remembering what no one was meant to remember. The scroll spun, faster now, symbols pouring from it like a flood. They weren't written, they happened. The Forgotten King was not born. He was dreamed. In the beginning, before time took form, before calendars, before breath was shaped into stories, there was a thought so pure, so singular, that it refused to die. That thought became a shape. That shape became a presence. He called himself Namer. No kingdom crowned him. No army swore to him. He simply appeared where minds were weakest, at the edges of despair, where people begged for order. And there, he offered it. Not with swords. With stories. He whispered structure into chaos. Gave tyrants reasons. Gave slaves a myth to believe in. He taught the world that power was natural, that obedience was a virtue, that dreams should only be remembered if they served a purpose. He was the author of hierarchy. Of empire. And no one remembered his name. Because he designed it that way. Selene awoke in a garden that had no sun. Petros was beside her, pacing. You were out for hours, he said. More than that, maybe. Time bent around you. Look. He pointed. The library's walls had warped, curving toward her. Books had unspooled their pages across the floor, forming paths in her direction. Even the librarian stood perfectly still at the threshold, head bowed, not in deference, but warning. Ninurta knelt beside her. Tell me what you saw. Selene sat up slowly. I saw a world being written in real time. Not remembered. Authored. Every law. Every belief. Every war. Shaped by one mind. Petros swallowed. So this king, he's not dead. No, Selene whispered. He's resting. In the place behind memory. Waiting for enough people to forget the truth. Ninurta nodded. And Myra? She was lighting the dream fires to thin the barrier. To let him in. Petros frowned. If he's just a memory. He's not, Selene cut in. He's a pattern. Like gravity. Like instinct. And now I've seen him. I've heard his name. Ninurta grew still. You remember it? Selene looked up. Namer. The name cracked the air. The librarian flinched. A row of scrolls behind him burst into flame. Petros stepped back. Gods, he whispered. The name itself. It's not a name, Selene said. It's a permission. They fled the library at dawn, if such a word existed anymore. The sky had split slightly, a long seam of white light running through the dreamscape above. Birds no longer flew. Trees grew in perfect geometric patterns. The laws of the world were correcting themselves. Petros wept softly as they traveled. This world. It's becoming a version of itself it never meant to be. The dream is calcifying, Ninurta said. Hardening into control. That's Namer's nature. Not to destroy, but to define. And once defined, nothing can grow. They traveled in silence through dream rivers of honey, over bridges built from forgotten alphabets, past statues of lovers who never were. Everything now pointed to one place. The final flame. It burned where no memory dared go, the rift. The rift was not a place. It was the absence of one. A wound in the dream. A pit of unmade thought. No dreamers had passed here and returned whole. Some left fragments behind. Selene saw them, faces made of glass, limbs repeating the same gestures forever, mouths trying to scream but caught in loops of silence. The final dream fire rose from the rift like a black vine made of gravity. This is where he will emerge, Ninurta said. Selene stared down into the rift. What happens if he wakes? He rewrites everything, Petros whispered. Not just dreams. History. Memory. Self. Could we forget each other? Selene asked. Petros looked away. Yes. They camped near the rift's edge. Selene couldn't sleep. Her thoughts looped endlessly. Each time she closed her eyes, she heard a voice calling softly, daughter of theft. Child of broken paths. Let me in. She stood and walked to the edge. And found someone waiting. Myra. Her robes were torn, her eyes dimmer, but she smiled. I never wanted to be your enemy, she said. You almost killed me. Myra nodded. Because I believed the lie, that destroying the old would set us free. But Naima doesn't want freedom. He wants silence. Selene's hand tightened around the sword. Then help us stop him. Myra looked at the rift. I can't. I'm still bound to the Dreamfire. But I can give you something. She reached forward and handed Selene a memory. Not a relic. A real one. A kiss on a hilltop. A laugh. A face, Selene's mother's face. Long forgotten. Singing. I remembered it for you, Myra whispered. So he couldn't take it. And then she was gone. Selene returned to camp. Petros and Ninurta were awake. It's time, she said. Ninurta opened a scroll, drawing a circle in ash around them. This is our tether. Without it, we won't return. To where? Petros asked. To what comes after, Ninurta said. They stepped into the rift. And fell. They awoke in a throne room made of bones and time. The sky above was black code. The floor pulsed with breath. And seated on the throne was a figure without face, without skin, without sound. Naima. He rose as they entered. Selene could not breathe. I am the shape behind desire, he said. The symmetry in your sorrow. The end of questioning. Ninurta threw a sigil. Naima devoured it. Petros began to speak an equation. Naima blinked, and the numbers unlearned themselves. Selene stepped forward. Sword drawn. Then I am the break in your rhythm, she said. I am the fracture in your pattern. Naima smiled. Then you are already mine. They clashed. The battle wasn't fought in space, but in story. Every swing of Selene's blade erased a law Naima had written. Gravity turned to dance. Time bent in spirals. Logic collapsed into laughter. Naima pressed forward with certainty, offering peace, simplicity, destiny. Selene answered with memory. Myra's gift. Her father's stories. The garden Petros had once grown, where every flower had a name. She screamed it all. And struck the final blow. Not to kill, but to rename. The dream tore open. Light filled the rift. And Selene remembered everything. There was no ground beneath her feet. No sky above. Selene floated in an endless space of white, too bright to look at, too silent to name. It wasn't light. It was pure potential. A world unformed. The place where the dream was being rewritten. She was alone. And yet she felt everything. Petros. His hope, buried under years of disappointment. His love of books, even as they aged faster than he could preserve them. His memory of her, the first time he'd seen her, dirty-faced and defiant, demanding an answer he hadn't yet written. Ninurta. The weight of thousands of years behind his every word. He remembered the first story ever told by firelight. He remembered the names of stars that no longer shone. He remembered what it meant to believe before belief became doctrine. And Myra. The girl who'd fallen chasing freedom. Who had dared to break the pattern but got caught in the current. Her final act, a memory, gifted not to be kept, but to be used, lingered like perfume in Selene's mind. All of them were part of her now. Selene opened her eyes. The dream was rebuilding. She stood on a bridge made of words. Beneath her, paragraphs flowed like rivers, each line catching glimmers of history, each current pulsing with forgotten names. The bridge led toward something massive on the horizon, a new library, unshaped. A blank story. And before it stood Naima. But different. No longer a tyrant formed of order. He had become a question now. His body flickered, shifting between faces he'd once worn, a king, a priest, a god, a general, a father, a voice. Selene approached. You're still here, she said. He nodded. As long as there is memory, there is me. You lost. I changed. Selene tilted her head. You don't sound angry. I'm not angry, he said. I'm waiting. For what? For what you will choose to write. She stared at him, surprised. You want me to rewrite you? No. I want you to decide whether I should be remembered. Behind her, the dream shifted. Ninurta stepped out of the fog, bruised but breathing. Petros followed, clutching a scroll still smoking with runes. Myra hovered beside them, her form now stable, her eyes silver with memory light. Ninurta spoke first. This is the choice. Petros nodded. All stories reach a fork. This is it. Selene turned back to Neymar. He waited without judgment. Erase me, he said, and all I gave to the world will vanish. Hierarchy. Structure. The illusion of safety. Leave me, and I will sleep again. Myra's voice was soft. Or you can rewrite him. Not as a king. Not as a god. But as a warning. Selene gripped the sword of forgetting. She thought about the world as it was, full of cages pretending to be ladders. Systems built not for safety, but for silence. Names removed from stories because they didn't fit the pattern. She looked at Neymar. Then at the blank library. And she chose. The sword struck the bridge. Ink exploded upward, black and brilliant, spraying in arcs of thought and song. She didn't erase Neymar. She rewrote him. Not as a ruler, but as a ghost. A whisper in the margins of history. A figure always half seen. A presence that reminded dreamers, power is seductive even when it pretends to protect. He would no longer be remembered with reverence, but with caution. She named him not Neymar. But the pattern that failed. And the library accepted it. The world reshaped. Mountains unfolded. Rivers laughed. Trees bent toward starlight shaped like question marks. Dreamers returned, not as relics, but as voices, Hypatia, Leonardo, Mary, Tesla, each offering a part of their memory to the new world, not to control, but to guide. The dream dial was gone. Its rings scattered across the sky as constellations. The sword vanished too, dissolving into wind. Selene stood at the gates of the new library. Ninurta bowed. You've done what no sleepwalker ever could. You rewrote the dream without losing yourself. Petros hugged her, trembling. You were right to read it. Myra stepped forward, placing something into her hand. A seed. What's this? Myra smiled. A new story. Planted in the world. Yours to tell. Selene looked out over the dreaming world. It was vast. Wild. Unfinished. And for the first time in her life, she didn't feel like a thief, or a vessel, or a mistake. She felt like an author. The world was no longer breaking, it was blooming. But just as flowers rise from soil still damp with yesterday's rain, the new dream blossomed over the ruins of old memory. Selene knew it wouldn't be perfect. The dream wasn't meant to be. It was meant to change. She stood at the heart of the library without end, its doors open, its halls ever shifting. Shelves rearranged themselves according to the dreamer who entered. Some rooms whispered. Others wept. But all of them remembered. She was its steward now. Not ruler. Not guardian. Narrator. And the first echo she heard was her own. Petros had begun cataloguing again. But this time, he smiled as he worked. The parchment moved faster beneath his hands, not because time changed, but because he was no longer afraid of it. For years, he'd lived in fear of forgetting. Now, he understood, forgetting was not failure. It was space for new memory to grow. Everything in its season, he muttered, binding a scroll with thread made of starlight. Even doubt. He passed Selene a stack of unfinished dreams, loose pages, symbols waiting for context. These are voices, he said. From the ones who never finished their stories. The voices that were stolen. Selene skimmed one. A girl lost in a forest, surrounded by trees that called her by different names. Another, a boy whose shadows told the truth more often than his mouth did. These were the forgotten. No, Petros said. The almost remembered. Ninurta, ever silent, had taken to planting thoughts. Literally. He found soil rich in story near the western wall of the library, and there, he knelt each morning, whispering lines from the oldest texts into seeds he conjured by hand. The garden that grew was impossible. Each leaf told a fable. Each vine twisted into symbols from extinct alphabets. Flowers bloomed with color palettes that had no names, only emotions. When Selene asked why he did it, he said, "Because some things must live in silence first, before they are ready to be read aloud." And Myra? She had not stayed. Not entirely. One morning, Selene woke to find her cloak folded on the bridge of words. A note beside it, written not in ink, but in a voice that echoed directly into Selene's chest. "I'm not a character anymore. I want to be a reader." She was gone. But not lost. Selene had learned the difference. Time, if you could call it that, passed. The library filled. Not just with stories. With visitors. Not all were human. Some were ideas wrapped in skin. Some were patterns made of breath. Some were echoes of voices long erased from the waking world, returned not to reclaim, but to rest. And yet, something stirred. Selene noticed it first in the quiet spaces. Hallways where scrolls rearranged too often. Rooms where memories pulsed like wounds. Then came the static. At first, just a flicker, like a thought interrupting another. Then entire paragraphs began vanishing from the air. Dreams crumpled before they finished forming. Petros confirmed it. "There's a glitch in the structure," he said, unrolling a scroll that bled ink onto the floor. "Something's folding back." Selene walked the spine of the library that night. She found it. In the oldest chamber, where the original dream dial had once sat before dissolving into the sky, there was now a hole. Not a tear. A spiral. Spinning slowly in the floor, like a whirlpool made of silence. At its edge, words unraveled. Names lost their shape. She stared down into it. And for the first time in weeks, heard a voice she thought she'd buried. Namer. But softer. Quieter. Not shouting. Whispering. Ninurta met her there. He was pale. Tired. "This is not him," he said. "Not the tyrant. Not the pattern. This is his echo." Selene watched the spiral pulse. How is that possible? Because even when rewritten, echoes survive. You turned him into a warning. But warnings don't vanish. They linger. Especially when the world grows tired again. Selene knelt at the edge of the spiral. What does it want? Petros stepped into the room behind them. It wants to be heard. Even if no one listens. Even if no one believes. Ninurta's face darkened. If this echo grows strong enough, it could start dreaming again. "Not as Namer," Selene said. "No," Ninurta replied. "As doubt." That night, Selene didn't sleep. She returned to the mirror chamber. Each mirror showed her a version of the library's future. One, the library becomes a fortress, defended, weaponized, curated by the fearful. Another, the library is abandoned, stories neglected, left to rot as new ones are never written. A third, the spiral spreads. It doesn't destroy the library. It categorizes it. Neatly. Painfully. Until all shelves are the same length. Until all stories follow a formula. Until curiosity dies quietly. She touched the last mirror. And saw herself. Alone. She woke and gathered the seeds Myra had left. Walked the library in silence. Everywhere the spiral had touched, she planted one. She whispered no commands. She simply believed. Then she returned to the spiral. And Saturday. Not to erase it, but to speak to it. She told it a story. Of a girl who once stole figs and scrolls. Of an old man who taught her that time could be shaped like metal. Of a woman who gave her a memory she didn't know she'd lost. Of a tyrant who wasn't evil, just too certain. And a dream that learned to laugh again. The spiral slowed. Its edges faded. The silence grew warmer. And in its place, a single line appeared on the floor. Even echoes may be rewritten. Selene smiled. And left it there. There was no fanfare. No final battle. No sound of trumpets or closing of gates. The dream did not end. It simply turned a page. Selene stood at the balcony of the library without end, watching the dreamscape shift with the rhythm of thought. The world below her was not perfect. But it was living. Stories flickered in the clouds. Laughter grew from tree branches. Cities changed shape when people changed their minds. A man rode past on a bicycle with no wheels, balancing on poetry. A child traded secrets with a shadow. Two lovers argued in dance. And at the center of it all, the library pulsed. Not as a building, but a being. A conscious, breathing archive of memory and imagination. Built not to house power, but to hold space. Space for uncertainty. Space for mistakes. Space for growth. Selene smiled. She was no longer its steward. She was part of it. Ninurta had returned to the roots. He slept in the garden now, beside the vines he had once coaxed from starlight and song. They no longer needed tending. The plants spoke to each other, weaving stories through pollen and leaf. Sometimes Selene would pass and hear her own name whispered through the petals. He carries too much, Petros had said once, watching him from the window. Even his sleep is burdened. But Ninurta never complained. He'd lived longer than most stars. He knew how stories ended. And how they began again. Petros had published his first volume. He called it the Book of Almosts, a collection of dreams that had nearly been forgotten. It was bound in skinless parchment, inked in midnight, read aloud by those who felt displaced but not destroyed. He refused to name himself as the author. Instead, he wrote. This was assembled by those who dared to remember. He taught others now. Not to read, but to wonder. Selene's chambers had no walls. She'd built them from transparency, from air and storied fragments. Anyone could enter. Few did. Not out of fear, but respect. There was a quiet rule among the dreamers. If you must speak to the Dreamwalker, bring a question, not a complaint. And when they came, she listened. A turtle asked if it could learn to fly. She said, "Tell me why you want to." It told her a tale about leaving behind the pond that betrayed it. She gave it a scroll made of wind. It flew the next morning. Then, one day, the sky blinked. Selene saw it. A flicker, just above the horizon. Not danger. An invitation. A corridor formed from clouds. The dream dial, long gone, briefly reappeared, not as a machine, but a ring of possibility, floating at the mouth of a new path. Ninurta met her at the edge of the bridge. "You feel it too," he said. She nodded. "Another page. Will you go?" "I think I already have." Petros handed her a small pouch. "Seeds," he said. "In case the next dream is barren." Maya appeared beside them, not in body, but as a shimmer of memory. She smiled. "You made space." "You planted it," Selene replied. They embraced, without touching. She did not take the sword. She did not take her cloak. She took nothing but a question. "What's next?" She stepped into the ring of light. And vanished. Years passed. Or maybe minutes. The library did not mourn. It waited. It dreamed. In time, a new Dreamwalker emerged. She stood in a city she'd never seen. A child with laughter in their bones. Its people shimmered like possibilities. Its air hummed with stories not yet written. She took a step, and the city bent to welcome her. A girl tugged her sleeve. "Are you the one who rewrites dreams?" she asked. Selene knelt. "No," she said. "I'm the one who remembers them." The girl smiled. "Can you tell me a story?" Selene sat on the ground. The city circled her like an audience. And she began. "Once upon a silence, there was a sound so brave it refused to die. The end."